Hey, this is Andy Wallace from zInspector, and excited to show you here a new set of features for you today that it's going to be all automatic based on your existing data, but give you very unique insights into your properties. And so if you're ever doing things like making on a whiteboard or Excel file, like here's my tenants moving in and moving out and what's listed or not, whatever that is, we're going to do that for you and characterize it all automatically based on your existing data. This methodology came about from I used to work as a property manager. We turned 100 homes in 24 hours, and we had tried to come up with this logic. We wrote different things, different spreadsheets. We had stuff on the wall. We had all that, but it took a considerable period of time, considerable technical effort to make this now all automatic for you without you doing any work, and it's going to give you very unique insights. Okay, so let's kind of start going into this. Now, the first thing, so who is this feature for? Any property manager is doing, like, say, rapid turns or pre-lease properties, you're going to get the most benefit from this feature. If you are someone who, like, let's say, doesn't even show a property for rent ever until 30 days and so forth, after a tenant moves out, I think that there's still benefits for you, but it's not going to be as important. It's going to be most important for people doing rapid turns of your properties. All right, now, next, it's easiest if your tenant data is syncing from other systems. Because if it is, all this is going to happen automatically. If you're not, then you can manually enter in your tenant's data to create these views for you. All right, now, so the first thing to understand is that we're going to auto-characterize tenants based on lease values. Okay, so and it's an important thing, as we have a term in zInspector, we call them leases, and that is how we group tenants together. So if you have, let's say, a few tenants moving in to a property on a certain start date, we call that term a lease. So you may see that in various places, but we're going to now set the lease status value automatically. Okay, now the next part of it is that we're going to be assessing your incoming and outgoing tenants based on these lease dates, end dates, move-in dates, move-out dates, whatever you have in your other systems. We're going to be setting the property status, okay? And so the property status, if you really think about it, is different than the tenant status. And it's this kind of distinction between the two that we have. Tenants have their own status and the property has their own status. And by doing that, now we're going to get some really interesting, unique insights into what's happening with your turnovers. Okay, so under property, so actually first here, let's kind of show you this. I'm going to cover the first one first. Let's go to the tenants based on lease values. Okay, so now this has been here for some time in zInspector on your tenants page. Really, this is a lease page. Okay, this is all of your sets of tenants. Under active, that's all of your active tenants. And if you really think about what happens with the tenant, it's going to go through a life cycle. So when you sign a lease, and let's say they're moving in the future, right, we're going to characterize them as moving in. And so usually here on all your moving in tenants, that lease start date is going to be in the future. Now, there's different rules. Some people rely on the move-in date or lease start date. That's its own thing. But either way, the moving in tenant is a tenant that is going to be moving into the property. Okay, a current tenant is someone who is basically current living at the property. Okay, so that makes sense. That's obvious. But what may be not so obvious is to kind of clearly have a separate status for moving out. Okay, so if a tenant is about to automatically move out, or they're going to maybe move out in a certain period of time, we're going to characterize that tenant as moving out. Now, different companies have different rules. Some people let them go month to month. Some people rely on the move-out date. Some people rely on the lease end date. So based on your accounting integration and your rules, okay, we're going to set this up. But either way, it's very important is to understand that this tenant is going to go through a life cycle of moving in, current, and moving out. Okay. Now, most people are just after a tenant has moved out, they're just going to let the tenant go to the inactive tab, okay? And so that's going to typically happen all automatically based on your sync rules. Now, alternatively, some people say, hey, it's moved out SD pending. So what that means is I could alternatively say they're in this list, and some people might use this to keep track of which security deposits to have to return, okay? So this is really a more advanced feature. We have other videos on that. Most people don't need to worry too much about that unless you want to keep track of your security deposit returns in zInspector, okay? But everybody will need to focus on the moving in status, the current status, the moving out status, and then the inactive, okay? So keep that in mind. That really is the status of your tenants, okay? So now, the next part is in saying, okay, what happens at the property level? So we have the tenants tab here. Okay, now secondly, have a properties tab. And here you're going to see this tenancy column. Okay, and so now you can actually search on this. So I could say, hey, show me all of my occupied. Yeah, that makes sense. Those are I have a current tenant in the property. Or show me anything like moving in or moving out or things like that, okay? So now these views, so I can say there's all of my properties that have my moving in tenants, okay, essentially. And you can run that, you can export them, you can do different things here, okay? So this searching tool here becomes very, very powerful. Now, one little trick here is if you do 2 dashes, that's properties without any tenants at all in the system. Okay, so for the most part, you're not going to see that, but I can also do a exclamation point dash dash. That is basically all of your properties with some tenants in the system. That's what's going to show up right here on this page. You may have other properties for various reasons that do not have tenant data. And so if you do that view right there, that's going to show you all that. So most people are going to just be able to use this and search based on these tenancy column attributes here and get the status. Okay, now let's kind of go through these different possibilities here and show you what we're doing and why it's really, truly unique. Okay, so in this property status values, okay, so we have a moving in status. Okay, well, that may seem obvious, but that's moving in. That means I only have a moving in tenant. Okay, so that would be, for example, the status you might see if you recently took over a property, you sign a new lease, they're moving in a few days. Okay, so you have a lease coming up in a few days. That's going to show you then right there on the property page if that is a moving in property. All right, now occupied, covered that before. Okay, that's if we have only a current tenant in the system. Also makes sense. Okay, now this is where it starts becoming powerful as we say turning, okay? So you may see a turning status there. So if we detect both a moving out tenant and a moving in tenant, then we're going to set the property status to turning. And so now you know this is an active property and something that you really may need to be paying attention to on any particular given month, okay? So that now, and then this is going to automatically happen. So as the tenant's going to be current, they'll switch into moving out, or if we detect a new lease, okay, we will change these property status values here automatically. All right, next, moving out. Okay, so this is if we're only detecting a moving out tenant. Okay, so typically that turning value, if you're, let's say, in a college town, for example, and you might be renting properties out months in advance, that's going to be typical. You see the turning, okay, the turning status. If you are a property manager who typically does not rent a property until after a tenant has moved out, and so you have that gap, you may just see a moving out status of the property. Okay, so that's how you're going to use these values to interpret the status of the property. Okay, now we have some kind of more advanced situation. So if you see just dash dash, okay, we talked about that. That would be no leases in zInspector. Okay, so that's maybe you have. We often create common units for multifamily buildings, or maybe you have some other units in your just for doing inspections that aren't synced or anything like that. So if we're not detecting any leases in zInspector, you're just going to see dash dash in that column. All right, now no active What that means is that there are leases in the inactive tab, okay? So typically that really should only be the case for properties that you no longer manage, okay? So that's what you might see in that scenario. There may be some exceptions to that though. And if there are, that no active, really, that's probably something you should look at. For the most part, you really shouldn't see no active there, because if that property is no longer managed, you're typically going to archive that property, and that's not going to show up there. Okay, so really that would be something to check if you're seeing no active. Why? Okay, you really shouldn't as a whole. Now that is something else, is that when you click on moving in, let's say, or this value here, that's underlined, and that's going to open up the tenants page. So that is one thing to do as well. Okay, so if you're seeing something there, you can click it. It's going to open up the tenants page, put in the right property filter, and give you the leases associated with that property. All right, next, see tenants. Okay, so we're going to show that on the property, that property status, see tenants, if we're going to see some type of conflict. So like if there was two sets of current tenants at the same time, that really should not be the case, right? So we shouldn't have two different leases in there. There's some type of overlap. So at least we're going to say, hey, see tenants, you can click it, see that list of tenants, and then you can make an assessment from there if that's appropriate or not. All right, now we have kind of an advanced feature, and that is if you create a dummy, quote unquote dummy, what we call lease in zInspector with the listed status. So this is something, so I could, like, if I was going to advertise a property for rent and I wanted to keep track of it, I could say listed and put in whenever that date was in here, okay, under March 1st, and I'm going to have that now as a listed status in here, okay? And so that can be very useful for you to give you some unique insights into it. Now, we are working on automatically syncing that status with various software, let's say once you advertise a property for rent, okay? So that is something that we are working on doing all automatically, but right now it's a manual step to create that quote unquote dummy lease. If you're gonna use that feature, the advantage of that is that we have some new property status values. One, it would be just listed. So under the properties page, it's gonna say listed if we only see a listed lease, okay? So that's basically telling you the property is vacant and yet it's advertised for rent, okay? So that's basically what it's telling you, okay? Now, turn anticipated, this is a unique one, right? This is saying that we have a moving out tenant, okay? So the property is currently occupied, plus we have a listed lease. We are advertising the property for rent. Okay, that is the turn anticipated. So that's a unique status value there. Okay, and that again is a little bit different than moving out, right? So a moving out status would be just a moving out tenant, but no listed lease. Okay, so that's it. It's very powerful. It really should be all automatic for you. If you have any questions, you can email us. Go here to schedule a demo or training session. But basically here you want to go to the properties page on the tenancy column, and you can search here on various things. And we hope it's going to give you unique insights into your property data and how things are turning real time.